There is a day waiting. Oh, okay. Oh, shoot. Alright, that's not calibrated correctly. I wonder if I can calibrate that midstream. I probably can't. Dun dun dun. Dun dun. This is Benjamin. It is 5:45 on a Friday evening in the Pacific Northwest. It's a little hotter than it normally is, but it's not terribly bad. I think we got up into the 90s, which doesn't break the house. When it gets into the hundreds, it's really difficult, but our house is kind of cool. But about this time in the evening, this side of the house where my office is just starts radiating heat. And once there's like a brook and like this kind of wooded area, it's actually protected wetland I have over there. Well, I don't have it. I'm just renting. It's protected wetland. You're not supposed to like walk on it. My cats do all the time. So the deer. I don't think any law forbids cats from going onto wetlands, but human beings are supposed to tread very carefully. But that drops in temperature pretty good right around 7 o'clock. So the entire strat for cooling the house is to position windows sucking air out of the ravine area and then kind of trying to create a negative pressure in another side of the house to kind of just move the cold air in and the warm air out. But we're not quite there yet, so I'm going to be a little bit gleamy and unseemlyly greasy of skin. How are you guys doing? I have not done one of these live streams in I think a couple of months. I have not really been doing any of this stuff. I've been hiding myself behind interviewing and not putting myself front and center, which is a nice feeling. It's actually incredibly nice to be able to do public things, very, very public things, but to be private while you're doing it, it's kind of nice because I can keep the channel running. It doesn't seem to be the case that people need me in front and center to be able to watch the channel, so that's really good. So I'm kind of taking a break from being front and center and letting myself kind of perceive things other than what I perceive when I'm being perceived too much. So that's what's going on with me. I have been, if you guys have like any questions, I don't even know if you guys remember me enough to even ask questions, so I could like field some questions if you have any questions for me. But I'll just ramble in the meantime, and hopefully we'll spark upon something that'll just let me speak sweet cockatry into your ears for a half hour or so. Cockatry, I should spell that in the chat because I probably said it wrong. Cockatry, I think. I put it in the chat, but I didn't spell check it, so. YouTube's filled with people who will correct your spelling and your pronunciation, so I'm always learning so much from being a speaker. So I could read a little bit from the book. That's what I've been actually focusing on because I haven't been putting myself front and center. I haven't been doing episodes where I do research and then I present my findings. I've been just like doing raw research of just interviewing different interesting people. But I have been putting the extra space that I have in my life from not being taken up by the space of being bigger than life through this parasocial means. I've been sinking that into my my project, the Alias to Dream saga. It's not a series, Alias to Dream series, Alias to Dream. It's not a trilogy. It should just be Alias to Dream, but what is that? It's a whole bunch of books, so I have to call it like a saga, I guess. But I've been posting the last book in the series, which is the first book in the series, depending on which perspective you're taking on the series, whether you're watching it be written or you're reading what it was that was written. So there's these parallel lines that loop back and forth in the center. But I'm publishing that, the Blackbird Variations, the final version of the Blackbird Variations, onto Substack at alias2dream.substack.com. And there's, I'm on chapter 12 now. I go in waves on this because there's some big problems that I have to sort out, like on every level of a text. There's so many different layers that you have to sort out, especially a text this complex. There's the getting the reader to invest in more of it, which is not the pressingest concern of the work. Like, I'm not really cared if people keep on going. So I'm not like, it's not being written to be sold. It's not being written to, just be like something that you take on a vacation with you and you just consume. It's actually, it breaks itself constantly. It breaks the reader's attention constantly. And it's from a broken state of being constantly. But regardless that that's the case, I still have to polish it and make it those who want to invest the required amount of attention into it, that they're always rewarded for their investment. So I have to be tinkering constantly with the sentence level, with the sound level, with the story level, how the story's taking shape, all the different stories taking shape. And then the frickin' prose, man. And prose takes a lot of time. Like, so I get stuck in these batches of prose that I have to go through and I have to rewrite. And you see like the third or fourth draft of it that I have, that I set down when I started this Evergreen work 4 years ago. I see that stuff. I'm like, okay, well, I just have to go through and rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it. And you have to fall in love with every single page. That's what you actually have to do. You have to be in a place where you're just pouring your love into every given page. And because of the way how the novel's structured and how many different types of pages it is, like there's all these different kinds of pages. And it's replicated in the way that it is printed. You have all these different fonts, you have plays, right? Sorry if this isn't showing up. You have blocks of prose, right? So you have all these different forms of writing and forms of sense making, and I have to get into the position to really adore that on every single page. So it just takes a lot of time and concentration, and I have 11 chapters put up, and the 11th chapter actually gets really fun. We did a whole lot of work because the main character goes through this depressive phase in the winter of 1996, 1997. He gets really, really depressed. And so does the entire book. It just gets really heavy and deep and serious and emotional and sophomoric in a way. And he's filled with self-pity, so the whole thing is just kind of that deep kind of struggle that he's being to do good in the world. He really wants to do good in the world and not like do good in a Christian sense of like actually helping the world. He wants to create a monument. Like he just wants to create something totally beautiful that will stand the test of time and that will just be this created thing. He just really wants to create this created thing. And so he has to summon all this weight of ambition to really like concentrate him. And he goes through this whole process of kind of purging himself of these different, feelings of self-pity and these different perspectives of things. And then all of a sudden it's summer and he gets really, he forgets all about being sad. He forgets all about being heavy. And he just starts to have a lot of fun. And so the 11th chapter, which is free on alias2dream.substack.com, it really opens up. The problem with this chapter, though, is that what sparks the whole thing of him like getting like super puffed up on summer and joy and life is these sexual encounters he has. He has these two embarrassing sexual encounters. One where this like 17-year-old girl is like really wanting him and he doesn't know how to deal with it. And then there's this other like older girl who's a couple years older than him, and he's 20 at this point. So like this 22-year-old girl that really, really wants him, and she's a lot more sultry. And so things get really they get really erotically charged, and then he sublimates all that energy and he just starts kind of going crazy. And so we switch from writing about this medieval town, or he stops writing about this medieval town where there's all these artisans that are doing all this labor and dealing with all these paradoxes and this really pensive, very removed from any sort of action, very considerate internal dialogue sketches of these men in this medieval town, peppered with this really weird kind of experimental poetry he's doing, where this kind of Nietzschean, Jim Henson, nursery rhymey, Jungian archetype kind of game that he's starting to develop and he's trying to play with, because he's experimenting, and part of the book is watching him figure out what works and what doesn't work. And figuring out what goes and what doesn't go, what flies and what doesn't fly, and what he can get away with and what he can't get away with. And that particular perspective of that town with all these really serious people is swapped out because there's this one guy in the town who's been taking notes on everybody and sending the notes through this kind of tablet into the author's page, and the recorder, this guy's called, is on the inside of the story reporting the story to the author, but the recorder doesn't care at all about what's going on. He wants to actually do something fun with this opportunity to write whatever you want to write, because that's the page. The page is this opportunity. You can write whatever you want to write. The problem is that once you start writing something, you're either contracted to finish it, or you shelve it, you have to start all over, and then you never get anything done unless you commit. So you have to figure out what to commit to, and the recorder is not committed at all to these freaking monologues with all these like really serious guys named the sculptor and the artisan and the illustrator and the poet and the alchemist and all these guys, right? Which again, they're kind of like minor arcana if you think of a tarot deck. And that's kind of what Tommy's creating, this minor arcana that will later on come back, but he has to flee from it, and he forgets about that, and he constantly is forgetting about everything constantly. So he can switch genres too, because he's no longer bound to being in a certain mode of making sense if he's not feeling into it. And so these sexual encounters kind of happen, and he is working this new job, and he's in front of so many people, and he's engaged in this, he's working in a Starbucks in this really fancy place of Chicago called the Gold Coast District at the Grand Cafe, they called it. And this was a Starbucks that existed up until a couple years ago on Oak and Rush in the Gold District of Chicago. And in the summer of 1997, Tommy's working there. And he just starts figuring out that every single time that he interacts with the person over the counter, that every time that he's there taking their order, it's another writing prompt, it's another blank page, and it's only 30 seconds long. And he really gets into playing around with that 30 seconds. That just becomes this little reservoir where he starts to stash his playfulness. And that elicits his brain kind of churning into gear because it's been thinking so hard and being so serious. So it's still on this like thoughtful level, but it's starting to ramp up. And so he starts spitting out all these aphorisms between customers onto this register tape. He's just having all these ideas, and there's just pages and pages. We collected these all because he brings them back to his house, and he stuffs them into all these different books that he's reading, because he's kind of ADHD, not really, he can't really concentrate on a book too long, because he's like, okay, what about going over here? What about going over there? So he's always consuming content. And so that's just his mind state at that time. And then he meets this girl, and they start flirting at work, and he's like, this is really, 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 really dangerous, because she's amplifying and reflecting my energy. This young woman that Tommy's working with sees what he's doing and is finding a lot of delight in that, and she sees that she could actually, just through a natural proclivity of her own, amplify and play with his brilliance, right? She's playing with fire, and he knows she's playing with fire, but they're both attracted to the light. Right? Which is what usually gets people in trouble. But she gives him an audience. She gives him somebody that's really paying attention to him. That's longer than those 30-second audiences, which is a crowd, but the crowd is kind of fracturing him, and it's very frothy. It's very surfacey, right? Like kind of, hopefully I'm expressing his state of mind in the way that I'm talking about him. But she gives him focus because she focuses on him. And that's really dangerous. And so he has to angle that away from him, ergo from them, and put it back into the art, because he has this long-distance girlfriend that he's very seriously bound himself to. And so he sublimates that attention, and through the recorder, who's bored in the medieval town, the recorder's really bored, Tommy listens to the advice of the recorder, and instead of writing about this tavern, the recorder through Tommy, or Tommy through the recorder, start writing about this cafe. And instead of it being a novel or a bunch of vignettes, it's a bunch of one-act plays. And they all happen in this cafe, and the cafe has a completely different texture to anything that we've seen in the book. before then, because music starts coming into play, and Tommy starts making this opera because he's writing all these different aphorisms, but then he starts hearing all these different nursery rhymes and these songs, and he just makes these silly little ditties about all these different vegetables and all these different animals that are kind of in the middle of this war. And he's like, well, what is this war about? And so he finds himself in the cafe that he's writing about, but it's himself that's 20 years older, that's been working in that cafe for 20 years, got all these literature degrees, but never actually did anything with them, except for think in this guy's head for 20 years about this opera. And so Thomas accesses this opera called The War of the Horses, and this entire thing happens where there's just these horses that take over the planet because the fucking vegans go after the weeds, and the weeds try to block themselves from vegans, and they go to this doctor. Anyways, somebody just wanted me to read the actual text, and I honestly am not in the mood to read it. I'm just not in the mood to read it, but I would talk about it, so I talked about it. I should probably, this is, yeah. So anybody who's just joining me, this is like a means nothing chat. This is Benjamin Boyce. I'm talking about a project that I've been working on for a while, and that I'm publishing on Substack under the title Alias to Dream, and the first kind of dispensation of literature is this book called The Blackbird Variations, and it's 24 chapters, and I'm printing them one at a time, though the later chapters get longer and longer and longer until the last one's actually a whole novella at the freaking end, because he's got to do a whole writing project because he's a literature studies, well, a narrative artist, as he thinks of himself. So how are you guys doing? Schmuck says, here we go. If you had your own radio show with regular segments, maybe a sounder to announce them, which ones could you come up with for yourself? What do you mean segments with a sounder to announce them? If I had my own radio show with different segments, are you talking about like a variety show? Is that the question? Like if I was doing a variety show, like some sort of radio version of the Muppet Show, which ones could I come up with myself? I would need a team of like-minded individuals that we would create the spread. I would probably at this point in my life be more interested in being a producer and like getting a bunch of creative people and then picking the best ideas and then pushing them in the right directions towards certain avenues of fulfillment. I have the capacity at this point in my experience of dealing with literature to kind of tell where a story's headed and kind of see the best angles of it. But I kind of need other people to really believe in the stories themselves along with me, and then we co-create them. And so I would like to, kind of be in between, like some producer or editor or curator of that content. And I would probably take 2 characters and play with them over the course of a few different fictions, if that's what the question was about. I've been reading Dune, so when you said segments, I had to broadcast. When you said segments, I was thinking about the big sandworms. Yeah, I've been reading Dune because I read Quentin Tarantino's novel Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is a novelization of his movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is my favorite Quentin Tarantino movie. By a long shot. I really just enjoy that movie so much. I watch it and I watch it again. I mean, if I had to put it on like par with another couple other movies that are my top movies, just off the top of my head, it would be The Departed with Scorsese and DiCaprio, and then Once Upon a Time in Hollywood with Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio, and Master and Commander: Far Side of the World with Russell Crowe and Paul Bettany, who is best known for being Vision in the Marvel Universe. But he's actually kind of an actor, and he really, that WandaVision show really allowed him to do a lot of acting, and I appreciate that. I read some criticisms about WandaVision, but I just enjoyed it, and I felt so much fun that everybody was having with that structure, that postmodern structure, in a literary sense of just combining a bunch of different genres and trying to formulate a grand narrative out of them. I thought a lot of those people had a lot of fun doing that, and I enjoyed them having fun. Eric, It has been a while since I've voice cast IRL'd, and yeah, and it's Friday. I'm sure there's a lot of very important overlap with other live streams that are happening right now. But maybe people are just not into me live streaming anymore. We have a cozy audience, which I'm totally fine with, because I don't want to have to disappoint you guys. So I'm like the pressure off. What were we talking about? We were talking about my fiction. We were talking about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So I read Once Upon a Time in Hollywood with which was a really good book. I mean, Quentin Tarantino, the first half of the book, there were really weird choices with words, and he needed an editor. It needed to be tightened up, just on a basic writing level. And I'm talking just the way that the writing is working itself. And that seemed to like resolve itself towards the end of the book for some reason. I think he just kind of got into the spin of things. There were certain passages where he just kind of goes off on Hollywood, and he's just dropping names for like paragraphs on end, and he creates this really weird version of the character that's played by Brad Pitt. In the movie, Brad Pitt in the movie is just this kind of this retired stuntman who drives Leonardo DiCaprio around because Leonardo DiCaprio is a actor that's kind of on the last legs of his career. But in the book, Quentin Tarantino turns the Brad Pitt character, Cliff Booth, into this total film nut. And Cliff just goes off on these huge tangents. And it just doesn't really work. But I decided to just go along for the ride and just let Quentin Tarantino just drop these names and just kind of try to picture what he's talking about and just use that as kind of decor. And he reshuffled the plot. And so it's just told differently than the movie is. And he gives you a lot more behind the characters. And I just really enjoyed it. And that was the first fiction that I've read in a long time. Ever since I got this gig on YouTube, I haven't really been able to concentrate on freaking the written page, because the way that audio works is completely different than the way that text works, you know, and being in the oral space is different than being in the writing space. It's a different wavelength. And once I read that book by Quentin, I'm like, fiction is fun. It's easy. And if it's a good book, it's a good book. And I kind of want to do that again. So I was trying to look for another book, and that new Dune trailer came out with, but by Denis Villeneuve, who is my favorite working director right now. For me, this probably is going to be disappointing for somebody out there, I can perceive, but maybe not. But like my top directors, directors in a certain vein, and they're all kind of different. So Quentin Tarantino is not necessarily my best director because he's more of a movie maker, a filmmaker, an auteur. So he does his own projects. So he's kind of in a class of his own. But just as filmmakers go, or as like directors go, David Finch and Denis Villeneuve, they just make tight product. I rewatched the first season of Mindhunter. It's on Netflix, and I have again canceled my Netflix plan. I only pick it up for a month to check out different content. I rewatched Mindhunter, and David Finch was the lead producer of that. They did 2 seasons. The second season completely ruins the first season for me, and they never made a third season, so I just refuse to believe that the second season exists. Kind of like that one other show. What was it called? With Woody and movie star Matthew McConaughey. True Detective, first season. It was a blast. It was a phenomenon. You know, you'd go on Reddit every day after the episode, and for the whole week we'd be dissecting the episodes, and we watched them a couple times, you know, and just going through that journey was just a really fun journey. But the second season was like, Mindhunter second season wasn't as bad as the True Detective second season, but the first season's phenomenal. The first season's absolutely phenomenal. And actually, when the David Fincher's directing these episodes, if you just look at the camera work and the blocking, and he can just do so much with faces turning at the right time, it just blows me away. The composition skills on this guy are just phenomenal. He's just such a good director. Fincher. He's just a really good director. I mean, I think the only movie of his that I don't really like was That Girl in the Dragon Tattoo, because it was just like a scene-for-scene reshoot of the Dutch version, and I don't know why they did that. I don't think they should have done that. I thought that was a complete waste of his talent, because it was just... I didn't really particularly enjoy that. I thought that was beneath him to do, but Gone Girl is excellent. I watched Gone Girl over and over and over again. Like, Fincher just makes movies that I want to rewatch. Like The Social Network, you have to watch that a few times because you got freaking Aaron Sorkin in the writing chair and everybody's talking a mile a minute. And they're just spitting words at each other. And then with Fincher directing, and then Trent Reznor doing the music, the Social Network's an excellent film. It's not in my top films because after a few rewatches, I'm like, well, I don't know if I like... The character isn't a heroic character. And so I just don't love the film like I do when there's a hero in the film, right? The Jesse Eisenberg / Mark Zuckerberg character is just not somebody that I love. So I can't really deeply love the film, but it's still an excellent film. Anyways, and then Fight Club, The Game, Panic Room, which is not the best movie, but like the directing of it, it's just so tight. And then that's David Fincher. But Denis Villeneuve, that guy is awesome. That guy's awesome. I didn't see his first film, which is in black and white, and you can find that on Amazon, I think. I didn't see that his first film or feature-length film, but his second film, Incendies, is so heartbreaking. That movie tore me apart. That thing is so intense. It's so sad. It's about these orphans from some war-torn Middle East country and just the process that their mother gets through to get out of that place. It's just such a harsh film. And then he followed that up with Enemy, which is a Jake Gyllenhaal movie, which is really, really weird. I really, really like it, and I recommend that if you're into kind of psychological horror and if you can be patient with it, that's an excellent film. And then in the same year, he did Prisoners with Jake Gyllenhaal and Hugh Jackman, right? And a couple other people that are not coming to mind, which is a tight movie. It's not my favorite movie because it's just kind of slow, but it's really, really good. And then he did Arrival, and he did Blade Runner 2048, which, whatever. It was great, but whatever. Now he's doing Dune. And I'm really looking forward to what he's going to do with Dune. I'm looking forward to what Denis Villeneuve is going to do with the Dune book. And they're going to do 2 movies of that. But they haven't started filming on the second one, so I think they're going to wait to see if they actually make a profit off the first one, which is unfortunate because the Dune saga is like preeminently... like it just leads to failed movie adaptions. Sci-Fi did a 3-parter or 6-parter version of it that wasn't bad, but it's kind of cheesy, and the main actor's like just kind of cringy. And then there's this guy who tried to do something with it in the 70s, and then there's the Lynch film, which is a complete clusterfuck because the studio came in and apparently re-edited it, and he never got around to re-editing it, so we don't know if he's being truthful with him blaming it on the studio for it being bad, but it's just kind of cheesy. So I was looking forward to that, the Dune movie, and the second trailer dropped, and I'm like, you know what? I tried reading those books back in like 2002, and I was so snobbish about the writing, and I think my perspective on writing is different because I was really demanding poetry out of everybody who wrote. I was demanding a certain level of craft. Or I didn't want to touch books. And actually going through it and reading it, the first Dune book, it's very well written. It's incredibly well written. Sometimes he'll repeat himself a bit too much, which is when you're writing that volume, that's easy to do, and it's not annoying, but you can just see that he could come up with another thing to say. But the writing itself is excellent. The plot flows great. The character flows great. It's a little cerebral. He took this third eye omniscient narrative view, which is kind of interesting. That's where the author can just jump from one person's head to another, and he's pretty good at orchestrating that and like really padding out the dramatic tension. And I got halfway through the book and it starts like banging. He starts just dropping the bombs. And some writers of genre fiction are really skimpy with plot. And that kind of drives me up the wall because there should just be infinite plot. You shouldn't have to starve me for plot. You should always just have more plot available and give me some freaking plot. And he just dumps, and by plot, I mean kind of info dumps, right? Or he just talks about what's going on or what this means or, like what this strange power, and he's like really engaging with the mythology, and he's bringing the mythology right to the front. So I know that he missteps later on down in the series. I have the first 3 books and I'll go through them. And I just been gorging myself on that for the last 2 days. just been gorging myself on Frank Herbert and publishing these interviews. I'm kind of like short on interviews. I have like 4 interviews in the wings that I haven't published yet. I need to listen to them because they're really, really slow interviews and they're very, very pensive. And I don't know what people want. I don't know what the audience really wants. And there's enough of an audience that not everybody has to like everything. And I think that I've courted a mature enough audience to just say, well, this isn't for me, and leave behind. Sometimes the audience can get a little harsh on the subjects, and sometimes it's just not appropriate, or it kind of stains the episode, or it stains the person's feeling that I got to open up on stage, which is like, it's just kind of the double-edged sword. But for the most part, you all, whoever's listening to it, and everybody else that's my audience, is pretty damn good with that. But some of my episodes that I have waiting in the wings are very slow, and they're very circumlocucious, and we just kind of walk over different terrain. And I have to go through and listen to them and see if they're of a certain quality that I want out there, or if they just don't quite, get up to par. And you have to make that decision. I made that decision before. I've decided not to publish interviews. You get them, and it's like, it wasn't really any skin off of that person's back. Sometimes people like really expect that interview to be published, and so they really, really, really want you to publish it. But for the most part, if you don't publish it, people are like, whatever, or you just reschedule another one. I don't like wasting people's time, but I feel that most of my subjects enjoy their time they spend with me, for the most part. That's an assumption, though. Okay. Oh, no. Oh, shoot. Okay. They updated this software, and they put the button of add to broadcast right next to the ban button. I don't know why they did that. So you could be reaching for, I'm just going to put you up on the screen, and it's like ban. At least there's a warning, like, are you sure you want to ban this person? Like, okay, I don't really want that functionality. Whatever. She was very much the metaphor. Loved the job, though. Loved it. What are you guys talking about? Rebecca's having a story. Maybe I'll chinwag over Rebecca's story. Do you mind, Rebecca? This is a really relaxed stream, so feel free to come and go as you please. Rebecca says, fiction is fun. I'm just going to go through and pick on Rebecca. Hey, everyone. I wrote a newspaper commentary. Okay, here we go. Rebecca. Hey, everyone. I wrote a newspaper commentary criticizing critical race theory, and I got fired from my job. Just wanted to tell people, even strangers on the internet. Yeah. Oh. Rebecca worked at a bookstore. I'm sorry this happened to you, Rebecca. This sucks. Sucks. She doesn't want to expose the bookstore. She wants to fight a great big fight against wokeism and not have it be about her. It was a very woke indie bookstore. Okay, well, Rebecca, we get to the point in the broadcast where we have to ask, what did you expect then? This is how these people act. This is not your fault. I'm not blaming the victim. I'm not blaming the victim. I kind of am. It's a woke bookstore. What do you think they're going to do if you use the wrong words? I mean, they're a freaking woke bookstore. They'll fucking burn you. Like, that's what they do. Oh, this is crazy. I'm sorry that happened to you, Rebecca. I'm really sorry about that. I remember the email. I've been really behind on my email. I'm sorry I didn't respond to your email. I'm sorry. Yeah. CRT. I'm going to have a young woman on next week who wrote an article that I thought was pretty well researched and balanced, even though I disagreed with her depiction of CRT. But she was trying to do a both sides kind of thing. I'm going to have her on next week. She seems like up my alley. We'll give her a spin and throw her on the show if it's a good match. You never know. Need some chipper energy up in here, right? Yeah, you know what? Wildlight Art says see Portlandia, and that was like the first thing when the first thing I thought was Super Woke Bookstore. I'm like, oh, I know what bookstore you're talking about. I know exactly what bookstore. I haven't been thinking about cancel culture that much. I just don't want to think about the culture war all the time. I don't even like. I only look at Twitter to find interesting people at this point. I just kind of want to take a break this summer. I'm just kind of taking a mind break from the whole culture war thing this summer. I'm just looking at my phone to see if there's anything on my timeline we're talking about. I'm not going to talk about that. There's just so many things to be offended by, right? And I watch other YouTubers just make content about content that's offensive in some way or another. And I don't want to go down that path. Sometimes you have to, though. I'm just taking a break. And so much of Twitter is just like, oh, here's something that was egregious. There's the Brett and Heather thing, which is interesting. Oh, man. The Brett and Heather thing's really complex. I didn't do it justice just having one guy on, but I wanted to give his project a little bit more exposure and figure out what's going on. That's really interesting. There's a lot of people going after Brett and Heather about their views. Their views on COVID or their views on the conversation about COVID. And it's kind of hard to parse out because there's so much muddying of the water. And I just don't have the mind to insert my head into that. I don't have a heart. I don't have the heart to insert my head into that. It seems like with science, there's a high probability of being incorrect. And I don't have any formal training to be able to not say that I'm not being incorrect. And so I would rather not be incorrect about it. And with the whole COVID thing, it's like there's just such a nest of worms. And then everybody's emotional about it, so you can't please everybody all the time. And you're always going to tick somebody off by having an opinion on it either way. That's just a big headache, and I don't know enough about it, and other people are taking all the flack. So I'm just kind of watching from afar and reading their articles that are written and, kind of wondering where it's going to head. Some people are taking Brett and Heather very seriously and levying some very serious accusations against them, or insinuating very serious accusations against them about blood being on their hands and them being anti-vax and being dangerous. All these people, this whole, this anti-woke culture that's all about living dangerously is now calling out their own for being dangerous. So it's like, it's an interesting phenomenon. I don't know the bottom of it. And I think everybody's kind of motivated because they're in different states of mind when they're approaching this particular topic. I have a friend who works in Washington giving out the vaccine in emergency capacity for the government. And this person works with hundreds and hundreds of people a week, sometimes a day, getting out this vaccine to everybody that can have it and doing a lot of the emergency work on the ground, the first responder stuff on the ground. And they have a very serious take on COVID. And they have a very strong position of it too about people who don't get vaccinated are basically committing suicide and allowing other people to commit suicide too. They take COVID very, very seriously, and the cost-benefit ratio of the vaccine to be in the favor of the vaccine, heavily in favor of the vaccine. And so I respect that position. I am immersed in people who are very skeptical of that position. So I, over the last couple of days, because when I haven't been reading Dune, I've been playing It Takes Two, which is a 2-player video game with my friend, my first responder friend. We're playing It Takes Two, and it's a really good game. It's a really good video game. It's really good. So we play that for a bit, and then I teach them about this band called Pink Floyd, which is another thing that I've been getting into. I just been having all these hobbies behind the scenes. So I should just chinwag about my hobbies. Just let all this freaking COVID stuff go. I don't know. But between playing It Takes Two and me exposing them to the growth and development of Pink Floyd, in a particular kind of spiral fashion. We started with Dark Side of the Moon, and then we went back to metal. And next time they come over, we're going to go up to Wish You Were Here. And then we'll probably go to The Wall because Animals annoys me, and The Final Cut annoys me, and their 80s album kind of annoys me. but their live albums are great. But The Wall even kind of annoys me. But it's a fantastic freaking work of art. It's just a fantastic work of art that I deeply, deeply respect. Even though there's some aspects of it that aren't as, I mean, they got away with Dark Side of the Moon, and they didn't plan on doing that. I don't know how they created that album. That album is, it just, I'm sorry, if you're burnout of Pink Floyd and you're part of like no more Pink Floyd spam, this might annoy you, but there's something about the Dark Side of the Moon it's sublime. It's beyond anything that anybody could intend to create. These guys just happened into this album, and I don't even think that they knew what they did after they did it. They were just working really hard and really heavily invested in their craft, and then all of a sudden they had this album that was deservedly one of the top selling albums. I think it deserves its place. It is neither overrated nor underrated. It is definitely something that is just a great, it's enjoyable, it's pleasurable, it's difficult in the right way, it's self-contained, it's poetic, the songs, everybody's just at the top of the game, the production is just top notch, and the mixing, like, just, anyways. So to try to figure out how they got there and then what they did after they got there, because they released it and then it just kind of climbed and climbed and climbed, and then they were superstars, right? They kind of were just like kind of this semi-successful band before that, and then they became like superstars, and then you watch them grapple with that and the fallout of all that attention and that pressure and that art, kind of seeking their original impetus, which is kind of, I think they're true artists. Every one of them are really true artists, especially I mean the two main guys in that band, Gilmour and Waters, they're dedicated artists. That's all they really are, and they have different views and political outlooks and purposes for their art, or what they do with their art. And that's why I kind of dislike The Final Cut and Animals, because they start to take their art and they use it, they kind of put it in this political way, which just, it diminishes their creativity. That, there's something about politics that it just turns me off to things. So I have to give Animals more of a better more listens. The people that I find that like it the most have English as a second language for whatever reason. Maybe that's just a poor sampling on my part, but there's just something about the tone of the language that they're using, that it's not exploratory, it's accusatory in this way. That's what I picked up, and there's a lot of bile, and I don't like that. And I don't like art that does that without like assuaging the bile that it's putting into me. And so I have to give Animals a good spin and see if they purge out, they go through a cathartic movement with that negativity. But there's a lot of negativity in that album. And that art just, good art takes the data. It could be truth, it could be a phenomenon, it could be a state of being, and good art implants that. It anchors you in, it anchors that stuff into you. So content does actually matter, and it can cause a work of art that's otherwise perfect to be well worth avoiding, because you don't necessarily want to exist in that state or have that state a part of you. Anyway, so that's kind of a weird kind of nod to people kind of avoiding certain kind of dark arts, because it's kind of turning dark. Yeah. So we've been playing It Takes Two, which is a good video game, and we're going through the Pink Floyd album, which again, it's like, Wish You Were Here was really, really good. That negativity pops up in the second and the third tracks, but the first and the fourth and the last track. So Shine On You, Crazy Diamond, parts 1 through 8 or whatever, 1 through 9, brilliant. Just wonderful. Love that, love that, love that. And Wish You Were Here is really, really good, but it's a little too good to listen over and over again because it's so freaking emotional, that emotion is so tied in it. But those works of art that sandwich Wish You Were Here album, which is their follow-up to Dark Side of the Moon, Shine On You Crazy Diamond, is just a great song. And that kind of harkens back to the song that they made right before Dark Side of the Moon. I think that they had the side project, which was a soundtrack to a film, but their other album, which is called Metal, has this 22-minute song called Echoes. That's a wonderful listen. That's a really good, I really recommend everybody just give that a few spins and just kind of walk through that composition, because it's just such a great composition. I think that's really important to understand. Like their true desire, what they're trying to do with music is they're builders. They're making monuments, and I respect that about them. Anyways, I'm really chin-wagging, aren't I? Matt24002, super chat, $5. Thank you, buddy. Roger Waters' solo career is a case study for how poorly political activism engages in art. I know. I find it almost delightfully kitschy now. You know what? I'll have to give him a spin. He did one album while they were doing, what's their 80s album? Shoot. A Momentary Lapse of Reason, which is very 80s. And that was Roger Waters left. He was kind of a jerk, to put it mildly. He left, and he was the main writer. Gilmore was like one of the head musicians, I think, with Roger. I don't know exactly how it's split, but David was a definite driving force in the creativity, but not in the lyrics department. And so without Waters, they kind of go in this weird direction where they kind of follow the times instead of setting the times. Although there are some really fun tracks, but it's very 80s, and you have to kind of approach it not as a Pink Floyd album, but as an 80s Pink Floyd album, and then, you know, adjust your expectations accordingly. And then there was an album that Roger did that he had the concept for Wally simultaneously with The Wall. What is it? So he had the idea for The Wall, which is a double album that they did. Roger. He had the idea for The Wall, and he had the idea for this other book. Oh, shoot. I didn't go to his discography page. I went to his main site. And his solo career. Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking. He had this idea for a song. This is very high conceptual, which is easy to relate in this form. It's easy to talk about certain art than it is to talk about other arts, especially art that's very linguistic and very creative or created or kind of symbolic or, you know, planned out in a certain way. And just off the top of my head, I'm not a Pink Floyd scholar, but from what I recall from reading about this over the last month or so, is that Roger Waters had the idea for the Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking at the same time he had the idea for The Wall. And the Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking is about a man up at night for like 20 minutes, like kind of going in and out of a dream, and he either imagines having an affair with this woman that he picks up hitchhiking, or who's hitchhiking that he picks up, or he actually did that, and then it's about his wife leaving him, or he leaving his wife, so it's about this broken relationship. And I gave that one spin. And it was a little too, it wasn't relaxed enough, so it was kind of putting me on edge, so I didn't really enjoy it. The thing about the earlier Floyd, the 70s Floyd, is that it's really relaxed and yet very full at the same time. It's very jammy, but it's really studied and produced, and they really made so many really good decisions, but they're in no rush to make them. And that's why it's just so enjoyable to me. So I've really been like digging into that. So anyways, between playing It Takes Two and listening to Pink Floyd, we talk about my friend's work as a first responder in the COVID crisis, and they have a different point of view than I'm used to hearing, and I probe them, and I wrestle with them, and I totally respect them, and they think that it should be taken very, very seriously, and that this is where they lose me, that you know, people who are kind of putting out misinformation on that shouldn't be listened to, or should not expect an audience at this point, because they think it's a life and death issue. And they have a different perspective than me, because I'm plugged into this internet thing. I live in the middle of nowhere. My day job is, it's all carefully mitigated, because the work that I do when I'm not doing the work that I do is, you know, it's heavily regulated work. So, you know, it's like this part-time job where I just kind of mask up, and you can't argue about it or whatever, you know. And I got the vaccine, you know, and I'm sure somebody's going to be quaking in their boots to know that I got the vaccine and I got really sick, but I've been fine. I'm not directly exposed to this pandemic, and I haven't been. So I'm disconnected. So I take the word of the person on the ground, and I also tend to favor Brett Weinstein's reasoning. and Heather's reasoning about things, but nobody has the full picture. Nobody has the full picture. Somebody needs to actually bridge the gap in these different ways of looking at the situation, because there are different camps that are very tightly set in their own ways, and they are resorting to some inefficient tactics to get their way about this, or to prove their point about that. Either, unfortunate or inept, or just inefficient or emotional or political or whatever. And Twitter is not good for that stuff. And then, being somebody in my position where I try to get to be friends with all these different people with all the different opinions, if I step into that argument, everybody's going to come after me because I'm not agreeing with them. And it's like, this is just one of those topics where you have to agree. Everybody has to agree with everybody, but nobody agrees, but everybody has to. So it's just like a stupid conversation to be in, because you can't really explore things, or it's really difficult. And so if I was half the man I used to be, I devote myself to collating, collecting, and trying to organize some sort of discussion on this. Maybe that'll happen. Maybe I'd be the right one. But because I don't have a science background, I can't really vet everybody, and I don't really know the questions to ask. So I should take a couple months and just interview a bunch of somebodies or nobodies about this and collect a bunch of different people's opinion, just so I start to get the terminology and the basic lay of the land down, just like what I did with gender. You start just exploring the territory, and you take your time. And a lot of people are like, why do you keep on talking about this subject? I'm learning about it, and then I can start talking about it eventually. Or I learn basically to have the right conversation that I don't think is happening yet. So I would have to actually study all the conversations that are happening in order to understand the conversation that needs to happen. And I haven't seen the conversation that needs to happen yet. I have not seen that yet. And I think it needs to happen. And I don't know who's the one to do that. Are you guys talking about Pink Floyd? Why is this freaking band button right next to it? And I stress the word 80s. Oh, here we go. Tumblebug. Let's go back to Pink Floyd. I used to be a big fan of Gilmour's. He's the lead guitarist. Pink Floyd sucked after the final cut because Waters wasn't there. I have much more respect for Waters overall than Gilmour. He's still my favorite guitarist, though. You know what? I've just been really getting into them. And that's the conversation that I want to have. I want to orchestrate a conversation between Gilmour and Waters. I've been really getting into Pink Floyd, and I got the freaking, I don't know why I did this. I've been getting in this. So I got their box set for Dark Side of the Moon, and it had all these extras and it had this movie on. I probably could have found on YouTube, but there's also this 5.1 stereo mix that I could play in my decent-ish system and really hear it. Oh my God. The amount of work they put into that. But there's this documentary on the Dark Side of the Moon, and Waters is talking about it, and there's this, I saw something in him that hasn't been expressed, that he was on the verge of expressing about that time and about the process and about the whole story. And I need to watch the movie that he made, Us and Them, I think it is. But I can tell that I sense that if I could have a conversation with him, I could get a really good story out of him. I could listen and ask the right questions and really understand his creative process and how he involved people with that and how not to involve people with that, and just really glean there's a quietude to him. There's a real quiet place, a really perceptive place in him. And I think that that's the origin of a lot of his best lyrics, is this point of view that he has. This not a point of view in a narrow sense, but this place that he can go and look out from. And I'd like to just explore that with him. But and then I'd like to talk to Gilmour too, but Rogers is more fascinating to me. Gilmour's excellent chap and just a phenomenal guitarist. But there's something weird about Roger Waters that makes him really interesting. He's just got that thing going on, and I think that's how he ended up making the lyrics that he has. Anyways. All right, Matt 24002. All the intellectual depth in Waters, Gilmore just used words for their sounds. Mason liked Coke like every drummer, and Wright kept his mouth shut. He did some backing vocals. He does some really good keyboard stuff in the early years, but I think he just ended up taking orders after a while. And I think he was the one who was kicked out of the band because Rogers was just like, "Why are you even here?" But I don't know. I'd have to go through. There's so much drama with that band. It's really interesting. It's just a really rich story, and I go back and forth between getting into the story. And then the story interrupting the art, or the story creating a narrative out of the art that the art doesn't need, and then kind of getting over that story and just appreciating the art for itself. But that's kind of the danger about knowing too much about the artist, is that you unfortunately have to allow the story of the artist to interrupt the artist's story or their work of art. Unless the artist artfully includes the artist in the art, and even then, it's a whole freaking can of worms, man. I don't recommend that for anybody that wants to write anything that anybody other than a writer wants to read, like they say. That's a cool thing about music, though. Using sound for music. Anyhow, how long has it been? It feels like it's been 56 minutes. I'm at the hour. Tracy K says something morbid. Yep, water is fascinating. Schmuck just found a dime. Yeah, I know this is not the most lively of live streams. It's been a while. I'm out of practice. It's really hot in this room, so I'm a little sluggish. I'm kind of just out of practice of babbling. I'm kind of trying to find my creative feet right now. I am concentrating on this really heavy work of art, so I can't really like just read the work of art because there's so much anxiety wrapped up in the art right now because I'm still producing it and it's live and I could change it at any time. That if I started to read it in a live crowd, I don't want to stain the art with apologicism. I just want to use the extra 4 years that I've gained since this particular iteration to add more to it and clean things up and put it out there, just to put it out there. Put it out there just to put it out there. And then when we're done with the 24 chapters, then we'll just bind it and then people can hold it in their hands. And I got to figure out a different way to print it. This is too big. It's printed in a very special way. And, I made all these artistic decisions about the book because part of the book is that it's it's not just linear. Like most stories are linear. This is not non-linear, it's polylinear. It's actually a physical composition. There's actual physical choices that are made and how the book operates as a book and as a text. But it's kind of awkward, and I want something that some like nerdy bloke can travel on a train with. So I'm going to have to shrink it down and then go through and redo all of the formatting. And let me tell you what, there's so much. I've spent so many years just trying to get Microsoft Word to do things that it was never intended to do, because I wanted to get like texts to do things that nobody thought of doing. So you have to break the tools that everybody's using with the text. So there's all this different like weird kind of stuff that I'm going to have to recreate it in a different format. And it's going to be a pain in the ass. And I have to go through and change all the page numbers, even though I figured out that you can actually program page numbers to change in a Microsoft Word document with a little bit of code. So the tools are all possible because just this heaping mass of crusty 40-year-old code or however long it is. So like it's really possible to do a lot of things, but you have to actually like kind of break it in different ways to get it to do what you want it to do. Thank you, Squishy. Squishy, I do not recognize your cover photo. It's nice to meet you. Not your cover photo, your avatar. It's nice to meet you. Thanks for joining. Water's under the bridge. Oh, you guys are being really, really, really nice. Thank you for being really, 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 really nice. Yeah, okay. 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 So let's kind of let's start wrapping this up. In my views, says, so this isn't my view, but this is my view. The pros and cons of hitchhiking is the best work Waters ever did. I'll give it another spin. It was just a little too angsty for me at the time that I listened to it. So. Okay. So Pink Floyd, Dune, COVID, interviews. I really have nothing on my plate. I'm really trying to take it easy. I have a family member coming into town next week. I will try to be making an interview every other day. That's probably too much, but it seems to be okay. Seems to get my views are going up, so things are looking good. The algorithm is looking kindly on me to a certain degree. It's not like I'm not meteoric in my rise, but it's a gentle slope. So I think we're doing okay, and I don't have to like pour too much into this particular thing, even though I kind of it's really important to me. It's actually an important fixture of my life. But it's also a work of art. And like when I spoke with Brett Weinstein the last time he came on the channel on the 4-year Evergreen anniversary, anniversary of him being protested at Evergreen, I asked him about what he missed about being a teacher and what he gained from this podcast world. And he said that with teaching, there was a cycle and he got summers off. I'm like, well, why don't you take summers off? And he's like, well, I don't know. How do we do that? We can't really do that now. So it's just like, I don't mean this about my particular audience, but just the platform itself and social media itself, it really is just this huge maw. And once you start to throw things into it and it spits out other things at you in such a way that you can actually afford to keep on spitting things into it, there's this temptation to just be on this unending cycle because there is no security to this. You do have certain audience stability. There is stability that you can have, but there's no real certainty in it on different ways. It's not like a job. Well, it's certainly not like being a professor with tenure. I'll tell you that much. I don't know who gets. I'm sure there is some version of internet tenure, but it's not codified at all. And the bigger you are, I mean, Joe Rogan's probably uncancelable at this point, but other people that kind of were halfway to Joe Rogan were totally cancelable. So, there's this anxiety because there's this constant demand. And, this is like any other job, like every other job. Like if I ran a taco shop, I would always have the expectation of producing tacos, right? So it's a luxury of me to not provide content, right? And so I don't mean to disrespect that at all, but also as it is a creative endeavor, I have to switch up the way that I do it in order to avoid some form of burnout. But not just burnout, but becoming shallow and to not produce quality content. And I think that there is a possibility to not be as productive as I have been, but I do want to be rather productive. I do believe in being prolific. I want to be profound too, And by that, I mean, I want to produce profound things. I want to produce things that are really deeply meaningful to people. And if that is just me listening to people and giving them a chance to be listened to, and that's super meaningful to people, I'm fine with that. But I just need to be very meaningful. I need to produce profound content. But I also need to be prolific. And so it's hard to like balance those two things, like potency and profligacy. Is that a word? I know it's a word, but I don't know if that means being prolific or prolificness. Profundity and profligacy, they're in tension. You can water out the potency, or you can save up and kind of ration out the potency. So that's just where I am. That's where I am. where are you? Oh, camera person on the other side of the camera. Where are you? What have you been doing? I'm going to add this to the broadcast. Robert O'Hare. Super chat. Thank you. Before you go, here, buy coffee or sandwich or something. Thanks for your discourse. Keep up keeping public conversations more honest. Here's hoping the cancel squad never gets you. Cheers, Robert. Thank you so much for your support. And thanks for everybody. I really, really appreciate the position that you all have put me in of being able to find something that's important for other people to find important. And so we're all kind of working on this together. Hey, Mars. How you doing? Shout out to Mars, guys. Folks. I'm sorry, folks. Follow Mars. Mars got some great content. Mars is just growing and growing in his ability to produce great stuff. And you all should definitely give his work a spin. He's my #1 fan too, but maybe we should have a contest about that before we make that decision. Right out the gate there. Super sticker. Oh, super sticker. I don't know what that means. Fan character dressed as a cheerleader jumping in the air. I don't have that particular GIF programmed into my YouTube. I should probably have that. Like, I should probably get Bodhi put a tutu on him and throw him up in the air and make a GIF out of that so that people can use as super stickers. If that's what a super sticker is. Are super stickers animated? I can't see it in my program, so I'm probably missing out on something. Oh, and so check out Mars's channel. Are you guys able to? You actually, I don't think YouTube allows you to click on the names and it goes to the other channel in the chat. So definitely check out Upper Hand Mars and check out Native Liberty. Great conscientious fellas, the both of them. Wait, hold on. Okay, now we're just... Satterpunk says your Evergreen documentary changed my life. Quite literally. I hope you weren't in it, my friend. I hope you weren't one of the subjects. And if you were, it changed your life in a good direction. Yeah, people have that's the cool thing about the Evergreen documentary. People find it. People hear about it and find it, and then they talk about it. They're like, I started watching this show. You know, they don't know me, so they don't tweet about me, but like on Twitter they say, I started watching this show. I can't get it. I'm totally falling down this rabbit hole. It's totally crazy. And it's exactly what happened to America. You know, or whatever. They're like blown away by it. And it's like 4-year-old news, but there's something about it. Oh, that's great. That's great. I think the content was good, and I did a fair enough job. It's not a professional production by any means. It's a thorough production. It's an evergreen production, I'll tell you that. But there's something about the content and that I was able to tell an impossible story, or just a super complex story, just a freaking epic on YouTube, just this free-floating epic. Isn't that cool that we can just do that? That's just so cool we get to do that. Everybody can do that. I mean, I'm not going to say that you're going to do that and it's not going to be bad because you actually have to figure out what people want to watch, and you have to find the good material, and then you have to figure out how to put those two things together and all the skills. It's not easy. It's not easy to do. I'm not saying it's easy to do, but it's so accessible. We live in a miraculous time with all of these tools, and these tools scare us and cause us to be very scary and treat each other like monsters and act like monsters. But nevertheless, there's some phenomenal amount of content that each and every one can participate in. Not even necessarily create, but be on the ground floor of like supporting artists, right? Or like being there when it happens and watching, you know, just being involved in the news on some level. So on that note, everybody, I hope you all make good decisions, and I hope you guys are reading things. If I'll probably leave this up on the channel for a day and then put it unlisted in the live stream archive. But if you get to this point, I will be reading all of the comments, and let me know what book or album you think is the top, right? Just the top. And I'll check that out, because I'm in the mood to consume something other than critical freaking theory. I want some creative shit. So send me your most creative stuff. And I do hope that you guys are good and that you're staying hydrated, and your neighbors are, if they're in need of help, you're able to help them, or if you're in need of help, they're able to help you, and you can just participate in neighborhood, unless you're in the woods like me. I guess I have neighbors. At least I have a landlord. And on that note, rent is due in a couple days, so just be aware of that. I'm gonna check out. I'm gonna talk to you later. I'll try to do this again sooner than later. Good night.